Good evening and welcome to Exeter Libraries in Conversation, and this evening we're delighted to be joined by author Jane Corry. These events are free, and if you'd like to give a donation to Libraries Unlimited, which is the charity that runs the 54 libraries and mobile libraries in Devon and Torbay, there is a link in the chat. We are also posting to 32 other libraries across Devon and Torbay this evening, from South Molton to Salcombe. And so hello to everybody who's watching in the other libraries. And if you'd like to ask a question, please pop it in the Exeter Library chat and I will ask Jane. So Jane is a former magazine journalist who spent 3 years working as a writer in residence of a high security prison for men. This often hair-raising experience helped her to inspire her Sunday Times best-selling psychological thrillers, My Husband's Wife, Blood Sisters, The Dead Ex, I Looked Away, and I Made a Mistake, which have been published in over 35 countries and sold over 1 million copies. Jane was a tutor in creative writing at Oxford University and an RLF Fellow at Exeter University, and is a regular contributor to the Daily Telegraph and My Weekly magazine. So, hi Jane, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your latest book, which I have a copy of here, which is The Lies We Tell. And that is out in ebook now, but it is out in paperback on Thursday, which is available in all good bookshops, supermarkets, and also from our friends at the Bookery, which is in Crediton. And there is a link in the chat if you'd like to pre-order your copy of that one. Also, you can, of course, get your copy from Devon and Torbay libraries. So hi, Jane, how are you?
I'm very well, and you?
Thank you very much, I'm good. So would you like to tell us about your latest book?
Yeah, well, The Lies We Tell, it tells the story of Sarah and Tom, who are parents who haven't always seen eye to eye. They've had a difficult time having their son Freddie, and he becomes quite a challenging teenager. And one wet, windy night, he comes back, hair plastered down, looking quite a wreck, and says that he has killed someone. Sarah can't believe this. Her lovely son would not do it. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't commit a crime. Tom, the husband, wants to go straight to the police. Certain things happen, and in the morning, Sarah has gone, taking Freddie with her. And that's chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, we go back in time, back 20 odd years, to where Sarah and Tom first met and how it led up to this. And then in the second part of the book, we follow Sarah and her son Freddie as they go on the run and see what happens to them until the end, where Sarah's faced with a really difficult decision. She's faced with the perfect opportunity to get her son off the hook. But if she's going to take it, it means doing something terrible herself. And to add to that, each of the characters, each of the parents have got their own backstories. Neither is whiter than white.
No, they're a really interesting pair, aren't they? And we'll come back to them in a little while. But you write such fantastically sort of fast-paced psychological domestic thrillers. What gave you the inspiration for this genre?
Well, I've always liked thrillers. I've always liked twists, but I never saw myself as a thriller writer until I took this job rather unexpectedly in the prison. I sometimes say I went from Woman's Own magazine to prison, which was true. I was working for Woman's Own, sorry, not Woman's Own. I was working for Woman magazine. I'd worked for Woman's Own before that. I'd worked for Woman magazine. My column ended. My long-term column ended. I had just got divorced. On top of my maintenance, I was in need of extra income, and I saw this job advertised. So I applied for it, hoping I wouldn't get it, and I did. And I then became quite hooked. I was interested in the relationships between the prisoners and between prisoners, but also between the prisoners and their families. And there would be family visiting regularly, whom I would sometimes queue up with at the door to go into work. And I wondered how they managed. And people aren't always the way you might think people are. And many of the men that I helped write talked about the pain that they inflicted on their families and how awful they felt. Interesting, very few of them talked about the pain they'd inflicted on their victims, which they were more interested really in the pain they'd inflicted on their families. my novels are not based on any particular people, but what they are based on is my observation of how prison life affects families, and in particular, how scarily easy it is at times to break the law by making a spontaneous wrong decision. And that really frightened me, actually, what things were done. So
I think the characters, as we're going back to the characters, you were saying there about, they're always very relatable and very human in your novels.
that's what I am.
And I guess that's because of, and so, you know, you do really get to know them and feel that you know them as you go through, and you spend a lot of time on giving them their backstories and things. Is that something that's very important to you?
It is, because no one is the person they are without their background. We've all been influenced by the way we've been brought up, by our parents' values, by our relatives' values, by their parents' values. I mean, sometimes it's a miracle that we're not all bonkers, really. But we are the result of previous generations. And I find that fascinating. So to make a character human and realistic, we need to know bits about their background, not all at once, because it would be like some kind of family biography down the years, but the bits that influence us.
Tracy's asked a question, actually, which is based on the characters. Was Betty in I Made Mistakes based on anybody that you know?
Oh, yeah. I loved my grandmother so much that it hurts just to talk about her. We lived with her for the first 12 years of my life. I was born, I don't make a secret of my age anymore. I was born 10 years after the Second World War ended. And it was a time when people had very little money. They were still trying to start again. And my parents couldn't afford a house of their own. I came along quite soon. And so we lived with my grandmother. And after 12 years, we moved around the corner from her, but she was so important to me. We weren't allowed to call her Granny because it made her feel old, so we had to call her Doris. And when I had the usual teenage disagreements with my parents, I would just go around the corner to Doris. And when I was little, I would sit with her in her sitting room and we'd watch Coronation Street and Equality Street.
That sounds great.
So Betty was not. I'm so glad you liked Betty. I'm so glad. And so, sorry, who was it who asked the question?
Tracy.
Tracy, I'm so glad you like Betty, because she started off as a minor character and she just kept knocking on my head and making it bigger and bigger. And I rang my editor and I said, I need to ask you something, you know, I need to change the plot slightly. And she said, well, I was going to talk to you about that. She said, I think we should make Betty bigger. And I said, that's just what I was going to say. So Betty became second voice. So this has really made my day. Thank you very much indeed.
That's great. I mean, the characters as well, and I think this is what makes them so human and so relatable, is because they're flawed, aren't they? I mean, nobody is perfect.
No, not at all. No. But children expect their parents to be perfect, a bit like we expect politicians to be perfect. I always think it's a bit unfair that people get harassed for things that they did sort of years and years and years ago before they considered doing what they were doing. And parents are meant to have this kind of flawless background, and it just doesn't happen. And that's why Sarah and Tom's backgrounds are so important. But I have to say, the one time I really earned points with my children was when I told them that I'd been to see the Sex Pistols, and that's a part of my past I'm very proud of, because it's given me brownie points.
Yeah, it's not very often you get those from your children, is it? Because they are. Your books, including this one, have the dual timelines, and also sort of they're written from multiple perspectives, and I find that sort of fascinating. And is it difficult to write that way, because obviously there's a lot going on when you're planning?
There is. It's a funny thing, you know. I started doing that after I'd written several books that hadn't been published, and for me it was an absolute light bulb moment, because writing from at the moment now, I write from the points of view of two different characters, but I also have an anonymous voice as well, usually, and I do in this one too. And for me, it pushes the plot along. It also allows you to see the character from the point of view of somebody else in fiction, as well as from your own point of view. So you can introduce quite a lot of twists that way. And I love the unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
And that gives you scope as well. And it is complicated. And when I'm writing a novel, I'm not really living life. I kind of go around with them doing the motions. But I am living that story.
Yeah, because you do. I mean, they are complex, aren't they? I can understand that. Yeah, definitely. And you said like about the backstories and how. So when you think about a character and you sort of, so for instance, Sarah, how does that sort of process start? Do you sort of think about the idea, or do you think about the character first?
The two are very close together. They're a bit like twins born an hour apart. So the idea comes to me, and I wanted to write about a mother who was tested by her children. I also wanted to write about how having children changes your relationship with your partner. And I'm constantly amazed at how it can change so many different relationships in so many different ways. So some people get closer, some people get pulled apart. Some people might do one or the other, and then it changes when the children get older. And I wanted to describe the tension that a challenging child can have on parents, and perhaps bring out the differences between those parents. So really, Tom and Sarah should never have got married, but they stuck together when Freddie was born. And then as he gets older, this prizes them apart even more, and their differences are more apparent. But there are explanations for this. So Sarah had one kind of past, Tom had another. And what I've tried very hard in this book is not to make anyone right or wrong, but to show how they can make the decisions they make. And one reviewer described it as a novel of forgiveness. And I didn't actually set out to make it a novel of forgiveness, but I do believe in forgiveness. And I don't see how we can get through life if we don't forgive. And at the end, well, I'm not going to tell you what happens at the end, but forgiveness does become theme. Forgiveness does become theme.
They are. I mean, they are like polar opposites, aren't they? Really. And I don't want to give too much away about the story, but Sarah has had a very sort of troubled sort of beginning, hasn't she? She doesn't really. Yeah. And I don't think, I think as you read that, as you get through, and I like that sort of, so I always think of it like peeling back an onion, and you get those layers as you go through.
Exactly right. But at the same time, there is lightness, because one of the other challenges about writing a thriller, for me anyway, is I like to get humor in, and I like to get some light. So otherwise it's all too dark. And so one of my characters, it brings in lots of fun and lightness and another kind of alternate view. She's a minor character, but she's not minor. She's kind of medium minor. Yeah. And also my anonymous voice, whom you don't know who the anonymous voice is. It pops up every now and then, and it's only at the end that you discover who it is.
I really like that. And I was trying to think of the one with the character, the homelessness. It wasn't last year. I think it was the year before.
Yes.
Yeah, and that had a shocker of a twist.
It did have a shocker of a twist. And I did a great deal of research into that to make sure that it could happen. But yes, it was a shock of a twist. Thank you.
And as we're on the subject of twists, you are the queen of a twist, and you do the twist so well. And your books always surprise me. Do you enjoy sort of getting that sort of twist in to sort of,
I do. I really love twists. There's something about, stories for me have always been magical. That I have retreated into stories all my life. Libraries have been my refuge, and so have books. But for me, a good story has believable characters, a place that I can see and imagine. But as I've got older, I've needed something more. I've needed that kind of hunt, that twist, which makes me excited, that makes me think, well, what's going to happen here? And oh my gosh, how did that happen? And then I will go back in a book to see how that happened, to see what little clues I've missed. So that's something I'm very aware of as a writer, that when I've put my twists in, and I usually know what the major twist is before I've started, that comes with the idea, and then I people it with the characters. But I get other twist ideas as I'm writing it. When I'm walking the dog or swimming, I swim in the sea most of the year round. And I will often get an idea when I'm in the scene and I can't write it down, I have to remember it. And then I will go back and sow that seed in the first part of the book.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting, isn't it? Other people have sort of said that before, that's those ideas of when you're sort of like in the sea and your mind is clear is when those pop up. So how do you sort of, do you take a notebook to the beach with you, or do you just have to like try?
No. I have a very visual memory. So when my children were doing their exams, thank heavens we passed that time now. I learned actually through one of the teachers to visualize things. I could still tell you quite a lot about Henry VIII because I picture things like a film. So if I'm stuck without anything to write it down, I imagine it like a film scene, and then that helps me remember it when I get back. But I have, if I am able to write things down, I have all kinds of methods. So I spend a lot of time on my mobile writing notes in my phone, doing automatic text, and mainly my phone, actually, to be perfectly honest. Yes.
Yeah, because you write one book a year, don't you? So do you have like a constant sort of, are you constantly thinking about plots, or do you sort of just
constantly? And if I'm not, I get very twitchy. So at the beginning of lockdown, the very first lockdown, like everyone, complete shock. I wasn't able to look after my grandchildren because we weren't in that first lockdown. And I wasn't at a stage where I could write my novel because I'd sent the part that I had written to my editor, and I knew she wasn't coming back for a bit. We have a schedule. So I thought I was going to have sort of, a month or so off. And suddenly I do get that off, but it's during lockdown. So I started writing a blog actually on Facebook called Diary of the Corny virus, because I have a great uncle who called it the Corny virus, and that was a bit of humor in a really terrifying time. And then I actually started to get ahead of myself and start thinking about next year's book, which is now written. And in fact, because I got ahead of myself, I have just started writing the book for the year after next, because I'm no good if I can't write. I'm really only happy when I'm writing. So yes.
So that's actually really interesting, because a lot of people that I've spoken to have said that they couldn't write in lockdown. So actually for you it was a real time that you could sort of have that creative space and sort of get on with it. So that's great.
I've always written through dark periods of my life when difficult things have happened, because it puts me in another world.
And going back to your books, and again to the lies we tell, your books quite often have dilemmas, don't they? So this one has the dilemma of the mother, and the was it the one last year, I'm trying to remember the name of it, the one about
I made a mistake.
Yes. That, and I remember that was about the husband, the wife, wasn't it? That was adult. What happens if you sort of slept with somebody else? What would happen?
It was her first love. Her first love came back into her life. I think very hard about what might make somebody have an affair, because I wanted people to like her and to understand, and so I made her marriage difficult, but not disastrous, but difficult. And then one's first love is a very poignant thing. One never forgets one's first boyfriend. I have no idea when my first boyfriend. But if you're out there, William Charter, you were my first love at the age of 16 in Harrow. And one never forgets, because it's your first love, and so that's where Poppy falls. Her first love comes back.
Yeah, and he's not all that. It's not all great, is it? It all goes badly.
No, exactly.
badly wrong. So you're a very successful author. Lots of your books have been on the Sunday Times bestseller list. I don't know how many it is out of them, but definitely the
last 5 have all been in the top.
Which is fantastic. But you didn't actually get published, did you, until later in your life? So could you tell us about that?
Yes, and I often tell this story to encourage others, because there are so many good writers out there who aren't published yet. And somebody once said to me, what is the difference between a published author and an unpublished author? And one of the differences is that the unpublished author didn't keep going and the published author did. So I always knew I wanted to be a novelist, and I knew I couldn't earn a living as a novelist at the age of 21. So I became a magazine journalist. But at the back of my head was always this dream of writing a novel. And I remember when our mother died, she was only in her 50s. And my sister and I were still quite young. And she was talking about perhaps what we wanted to do in the future. And we knew this was the last week or so of her life. And she said to me, what do you want to do, Janie? And I said, well, I want to write a novel one day. And I felt very silly saying it. And she said, I thought so. And I'll never forget the way she said that, because it kind of gave me not just permission, but faith that she thought I could do this, which was so important to me. And yes, when my youngest son went to school, I started writing my first novel, and I got an agent immediately. And it was in the days where you didn't submit electronically, you sent the actual paper, the whole manuscript. And if the publisher turned it down, it went to the next publisher. So if it got very dog-eared, the publisher knew it had done the rounds. And this went on for one novel a year for 10 years, and I didn't get published. And every time I would still, when I got rejected, I would then write another novel. And at the same time, I was working as a freelance for women's magazines and the Telegraph, and also bringing up my 3 children. So the stress was and the expectations and the hopes and the dashes, it was stressful and upsetting. And then I wrote a book that did make it, which was very exciting. It was a romance. And for 6 years after that, I wrote romance. And then, as I said, I was influenced by my time in the prison, and then started writing thrillers. But the other thing that really, really helped me was that I went to this talk during that time of being unpublished as a novelist by the fiction editor of my weekly magazine. And she talked about the opportunities for writing short stories. And it spurred me on, and I started writing short stories for them, and I still write short stories for magazines, and I love doing that. I find it hard to do at the same time as writing a novel. I tend to write the short stories when I've got that gap between novels, because it requires a different headset, different mindset. But that really helped. And I learned a lot through writing those books that didn't get published. I learned by rereading them, by realizing that I hadn't revised them enough. I went to lots of talks about how to write a novel, and I kind of learnt the hard way through my own mistakes.
Did you ever think about going back to sort of romance, or is sort of crime your...
My short stories are usually romantic, although they've got twists to them. No, I don't think so. I think that was a stage of my life that was then, and I think now I'm doing this. Yeah. Well, what I would like to do, and I'm going to do it, I have started doing it just in my spare time, just for fun, is writing a children's story for my grandchildren and their friends.
Oh, that's lovely.
So yeah, but that's,
does that be a picture book or more of a novel, a children's novel?
They're just, it's just a kind of rhyming children's book just for us, just within the family. But it is something that I would quite like to do at some point. Yes, but at the moment I'm just really happy with my thrillers.
Yeah, well, they're massively successful. You've got a huge fan following, haven't you? People love waiting for your book to come out and see it on the... I'm sure on Thursday there'll be lots of photos of it around the shops, and
well, it'll be very exciting. Thank you. It's in Women and Home magazine, which is very exciting, and in various other reviews. So I'm very grateful. It's a terribly tense time just before publication. You just hope people like your story. It's a bit like laying yourself bare to people. But
talking about that, is there more pressure because you've had 5 Sunday Times sort of bestsellers? Do you feel more pressure now than you did in the beginning?
It's a pressure I put on myself. Nobody else puts that pressure on me. I put it on myself. I really hope it gets into the top 10 again. I really do. And I feel this particular story is very close to my heart for so many different reasons. It has had some lovely advanced reviews from bloggers, and I hope people like it.
I'm sure they will. I've read it, and I think it's really, really good. I was
Thank
gripped
you.
by it, so
Thank you very
yeah,
much.
so definitely can recommend it. Going back to your sort of experience, so you wrote as a tutor, and you said about your short stories and your newspaper columns. What's your favourite to write? I mean, you love writing. You can hear that writing is everything to you. So, but what is your sort of, if somebody said to you, right, you can only write.
Oh, terrible! I don't know. It's a bit like, oh gosh, I think that's a really hard thing to say. There are a mixture. There are certain days when I feel like I want to write a short story. If I absolutely had to choose, it would be novels, because I can really get into another world forever and ever. You know, novel goes on for a long time, and you've got so much scope for different things happening. So yeah, it would have to be novels.
Yes, I mean, it's very, I mean, from other authors I've spoken to, that's sort of, it's very different, isn't it, to write a short story than it is to, because you have such a short amount of time to introduce the characters, introduce the plot, and then it's over.
But that's the challenge, to get a story to get a plot in a short story. That's your challenge, and it really can be done. And sometimes one will give me an idea for the other, and you have to have a novel. Sorry, you have to have an idea that lends itself to a short story rather than a novel.
I was thinking, because Agatha Christie wrote quite a lot of her early books as short stories, didn't she? And then developed them into novels. Have you had that happen to you?
I haven't done that. It is something that's worth considering at some point, perhaps. But because there tend to be different genres, because my short stories are lighter, there is a twist in them, and my novels are. They're not all dark, but because there is humor in them as well, but it is a different genre. So I think they're probably best kept in different rooms. I think I'll keep them in separate beds. I won't let them share a bed yet.
So another question I've got from you is actually from my husband, who's doing the tech tonight. So he'd like to know whether any of the early books would they ever get published now? Do you think you'd ever sort of bring them out?
Well, I do think about it sometimes, but I think they're probably best relegated to the attic. And in actual fact, they're on floppy disks, and I don't even know how I would get them read. I mean, some I printed out, so I have a cupboard full of manuscripts. You know, I think I shall leave that to the children to sort out when I'm gone. And they can decide what to do with them.
Yeah, I'm sure there must be a way that you can get them on floppy disk if you, but I'm not sure my technology is up to that.
No, quite, yes. Although we've all become Zoom experts, haven't we?
We have, definitely, yes. I know it's completely bizarre how we've managed that in that short period of time. Yeah. I don't think any of us would have done that.
Wonderful.
So I've got we've got about 10 minutes left, and one of the things I was going to talk to you about is that you're writer in residence for the Sidmouth Literary Festival.
Yes, I am.
And that is, I'm just looking at the dates, from the 28th of June, I'm just looking where we are, 28th of June until the 4th of July.
That's right, yes.
And we have a library in Sidmouth, which, would you like to tell us about?
Absolutely. So I helped to found the Sidmouth Literary Festival 5 years ago, and as you say, I'm writer in residence as well. And we've had lots of amazing speakers over the years, including Nicholas Parsons. One of the scariest moments of my life was when I got stuck in a lift with Nicholas Parsons. It was totally my fault. We were in a lift in Kenaway, and I was standing too close to the walls. It's one of these lifts. I don't know if that lift still exists now, but it's one of these lifts where you can't stand near the wall or it stops. Anyway, it stopped, and he was shocked. I was shocked, and I found myself saying the immortal line, "I'm sure somebody will be here in a minute."
And were they?
They were wonderful, but we were stuck between floors until I was told that we needed to stand away from the walls, and then of course it moved and it was fine. But that was, gosh, definitely a breathtaking moment in my life. He was wonderful, Nicholas Parsons. And we've had some great speakers, Faye Weldon, whom I have to say was wonderful to me when I went to interview her way before I got published and confessed that I wanted to write a novel. So she said, well, send me a chapter. And she gave me some feedback,
Oh, how
which
lovely.
I thought was just lovely of her, really lovely. So this year, we've got Terry Waite. So most of these events, all the speaker events are totally free. We've got Terry Waite on Monday the 28th. We've got Naomi Ishiguro on the 29th. We've got David Mitchell on the 30th. We have Sarah Moss on the 1st of July. And we have Andy Cooper, editor of Devon Life, interviewing Lucy Holland on her new book. Lucy works in Waterstones, actually, in Exeter, and her new book is absolutely brilliant. And we've also got Andy Cooper reading his children's book. And we have on the Sunday, the 4th of July, our How to Get Published Day, when there will be advice from my Penguin editor, an editor also from HarperCollins, agents, and an independent publisher, and 2 self-published authors.
Fantastic.
So the only event that costs is the How to Get Published for £15, and the other events are all free online this year. And
so you're just online this year. You're not having it.
Yeah. And next year we hope to get back to face again. So if you look up on the website www.sidmouth.litfest.co.uk.
And we'll pop a link in the chat as well. So if you want to have a look at that one. Yeah, no, it sounds great. You've been involved with the literary festival, as you say, for a long time, and it's been really difficult, hasn't it? Not being able to have those face-to-face events. Have you missed those as an author?
Yes, I have missed them because I love talking to people. And I have missed them, but at the same time, one's terribly aware that there have been so many dangers in face-to-face contact. So
definitely.
I think we've all adapted very well, really.
Yeah. Did you have the festival last year? Did you have it online last year?
No, we didn't have it online last year.
No.
It all happened because we had hoped that we might have a face-to-face. I think last year nobody really knew what was happening.
No, not at all.
So we didn't. But this year we made a decision quite early on in the year to play very safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad we did. I think it's the right decision to make, actually.
I really enjoy online festivals, and I think they can be, we found with these events for the libraries that, we can sort of spread them right across Devon, and
Absolutely.
People don't have to travel. And also it means that we're able to get a sort of a wider range of authors as well, because they don't have to travel so far.
No, I know. I completely agree with you. And talking of online events, I'm having a book launch event on June the 30th at 6 p.m. And my agent will be talking to me about how I got published, and we're hoping to give tips as well to other people who are looking for an agent. So if people would like an invitation to that, if they can drop you a line in the chat box, if they drop their email to you, then I'd be happy to.
And I'll forward them to you. Yeah, so that's fine.
If anyone would like to come to my Zoom launch, it's June the 30th, 6 p.m, and you can meet my agent and ask her questions.
Fantastic. That sounds great. I'm sure there'll be lots of people looking forward to that. So finally, just before we finish, as we're in the summer, and I've no doubt that I can see behind you that you have a lot of books.
I do. Yes.
So a couple of questions about what you like to read. So what do you like to read in the summer?
Gosh, what do I like to read in the summer? Okay, well, I'm going to just change that question slightly and say that at the beginning of lockdown, I discovered Persephone Books. Now,
they're beautiful. Yes, I think they've just moved to Bath, haven't they?
They have moved to Bath. So Persephone Books is specialised in publishing books written in the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s mainly, not always. Many from authors who have kind of faded and people don't know their names anymore, but although there are some whose names we would recognise. And I found them very comforting to read. I'm not quite sure why I use the word comforting, because some of their stories are very poignant, but I just love them. So I would recommend that people look up Persephone Books. I also am lucky enough to get proofs of advanced copies to read. So I really enjoyed reading Adele Park's new book and Lisa Jewell's new book, and B.A. Paris. And at the moment, I'm reading a really good thriller, which again, it hasn't come out yet, but will come out. It's by Emma Curtis, and it's called Invite Me In. And
oh yes, I've seen that one. That one looks fabulous.
And I'm really enjoying that. Yes.
So you do read quite a lot of. Can you read the thrillers when you're writing thrillers?
No,
or
I very rarely. I never read thrillers. When I say for pleasure, it sounds. I mean, I do enjoy reading thrillers to give a quote, but I only read thrillers to give a quote. When reading for myself, I actually like to read outside my genre.
Yeah.
And that's why Persephone Books are just so wonderful. I read at night. I read in bed at night. I only read about a chapter a night, and then I zonk out completely. But it's amazing how you. Well, and actually, sometimes I read 2 or 3 chapters, actually, just depending. And it's amazing how much you can get through just by reading at night. So often people say, "Oh, they don't have time to read," as though it's a luxury. But actually, it's I think shouldn't be seen as a luxury. It should be. We owe it to ourselves to do something that we like doing, and one shouldn't be ashamed of.
And it's sort of proven to have so many health benefits, hasn't
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah.
After 6 minutes, I think your blood pressure lowers, and there's all sorts of benefits to reading.
And I tell you, the other thing that lockdown has taught me about reading, I discovered that you could download the first 3 chapters free on Kindle of many books. And it gave me a chance to decide if I liked the look of them before I bought them. And I only discovered that in lockdown, when bookshops were shut and when libraries were shut, and I wanted something to read. And that's actually quite a useful thing to do.
I think that the other thing with lockdown that's sort of shown us as well is the increase of the digital books, the ebooks and audiobooks that we have in the libraries on our Libby and our BorrowBox apps. They rocketed something like 400% or something.
Absolutely. I mean, my dad, who's 97, unfortunately lives hundreds of miles away from here. His sight is very poor, and so we introduced him to the audio word. Well,
thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jane. It's been a joy as always, and good luck with The Lies We Tell on Thursday. I'm sure it will be all over Twitter and social media, people sharing pictures and reviews. So yes, and I hope that the Sidmouth Literary Festival goes well. I'll be having a look at the events when I come off of this to see what I can book to go on, because as well as doing the events, I actually quite like going to other people's, because it's quite enjoyable.
We hope to see you there, and thank you so much for having me. And as I said, if anyone wants to come to my launch, if they want to email you in the chat box.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.